What if the scariest moments of your life happened when you least expected them? Most of us go about our days believing we're safe, that the world is predictable, and that the real horrors are just stories told to keep us up at night. But sometimes the line between ordinary and terrifying blurs in an instant. It's in those moments, when the familiar turns strange, when a shadow lingers too long, or when a sound in the darkness makes your heart race, that true fear takes hold. Tonight, you'll hear 10 terrifying true stories that will make you question every shadow, every sound, and every stranger. These aren't urban legends or tales passed down through generations. They're real experiences, lived by real people who never saw the horror coming. Each story will pull you deeper into a world where the unexpected is always lurking just out of sight. Stay with me until the end, because the final story is the most disturbing of all. If you think you know what to expect, think again. Sometimes the scariest things are the ones you never see coming, and after tonight, you might never look at the world the same way again. There's a certain comfort in being home alone, the quiet settling over the house like a familiar blanket. That night, I relished the solitude, curled up on the couch with a book and a mug of tea. The world outside was silent, save for the occasional gust of wind rattling the windows. Midnight crept closer, and I considered heading to bed, but something made me pause. A faint crunching sound from the front yard, too deliberate to be the wind. I set my book aside and listened, heart thumping. The sound came again, closer this time, as if someone was walking slowly across the gravel path beneath my window. I peered through the blinds, but the darkness outside was thick, swallowing the yard and everything in it. I told myself it was just a stray animal, maybe a raccoon, but the footsteps didn't match. They were heavy, measured, and they stopped right outside my window. I held my breath, every sense straining. The footsteps resumed, circling the house, pausing at each window as if whoever or whatever was out there was searching for a way in. I locked every door and window, my hands shaking. The footsteps faded, replaced by silence, but sleep was impossible. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every shadow seemed to move. When dawn finally broke, I forced myself to check outside. On the porch, I found muddy footprints, bare, human, and far too large to belong to anyone I knew. They circled the house, stopping at every window, and vanished at the edge of the yard. I never found out who or what had been watching me that night. Most people never find out who's really watching them at night, and sometimes it's better that way. It was supposed to be a simple drive home, a shortcut through the countryside to avoid the late-night traffic on the highway. The road was narrow and unfamiliar, winding between fields and patches of dense woods. At first, the drive felt peaceful, the headlights carving a path through the darkness, the radio playing softly in the background. I barely noticed when the pavement turned to gravel or when the trees pressed closer to the edge of the road. Halfway down the forgotten road, my car sputtered and the engine died, leaving me stranded in the middle of nowhere. I tried the ignition again and again, but the only response was the hollow click of a dead battery. The silence outside was absolute, broken only by the distant call of an owl. I reached for my phone, but there was no signal, just a blank screen and the growing sense of isolation. As I sat in the car, trying to decide what to do, strange lights appeared in the woods ahead. They flickered and danced between the trees, too bright and erratic to be flashlights or passing cars. My heart pounded as the lights drew closer, weaving through the forest in impossible patterns. I locked the doors and ducked down, watching as the lights circled the car, casting long, shifting shadows across the dashboard. Then, just as suddenly as they appeared, the lights vanished. The car started on the first try, the radio blaring static before returning to normal. I sped away, not daring to look back until I reached the main road. I never found out what those lights were, but I've never taken that shortcut again. Sometimes, the most ordinary drives can turn into nightmares, and the things you see on forgotten roads are better left unexplained. Our house always had its quirks: creaking floors, drafty windows, and a basement door that never seemed to close quite right. For years, we brushed off the odd noises that drifted up from below, the occasional thump, the soft scrape of something moving across the concrete. We told ourselves it was just the house settling, or maybe a mouse or two. But as the nights grew colder, the sounds became harder to ignore. One evening, as we sat in the living room, a loud bang echoed from the basement. The dog barked and refused to go near the door. My parents exchanged uneasy glances, but my dad grabbed a flashlight and led the way downstairs, my mom and I following close behind. The air grew colder with each step, and the beam of the flashlight danced across the cluttered shelves and old boxes. At the far end of the basement, the door to the storage room was ajar. My dad pushed it open, and the smell of damp earth and something sour filled the air. Inside, we found a makeshift bed made from old blankets, empty food wrappers, and a pile of clothes that didn't belong to any of us. Scratched into the wall were strange symbols and a list of dates, some recent, some from months ago. A chill ran through me as I realized someone had been living down there, sneaking in and out without us ever knowing. We called the police, but whoever it was had vanished, leaving only their belongings and the unsettling evidence of their presence. For weeks after, I jumped at every sound, every creak of the floorboards above the basement. You won't believe what people are capable of hiding right under your nose, and sometimes the scariest things are the ones you discover in your own home. Running at dusk was my favorite way to clear my head after a long day. The park near my apartment was usually quiet in the evenings, the winding paths lined with trees and the distant hum of traffic barely audible. That night, the air was cool and the sky streaked with the last colors of sunset. I set off at a steady pace, earbuds in, letting the rhythm of my footsteps drown out the world. Halfway through my route, I felt it, a prickling at the back of my neck, the unmistakable sense of being watched. I glanced over my shoulder, but the path behind me was empty. I tried to shake off the feeling, blaming it on nerves or an overactive imagination. But as I rounded a bend, I caught a glimpse of movement in the trees. Someone was there, just out of sight, matching my pace. I sped up, heart pounding, but the footsteps behind me grew louder, closing the distance. I yanked out my earbuds, listening to the crunch of gravel and the rustle of leaves. The park, once peaceful, now felt like a trap. I darted off the main path, weaving between trees, hoping to lose whoever was following me. For a moment, the footsteps stopped. I pressed myself against a tree, barely daring to breathe. Then, a shadow passed just a few feet away, silent and deliberate. I waited until the figure disappeared into the darkness before sprinting for the exit, not stopping until I reached the safety of the streetlights. I never saw the stalker's face, and I never ran in that park alone again. What would you do if you knew you were being hunted? Sometimes the scariest threats are the ones that move in silence, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind that made the world feel safe and ordinary. My younger brother and I were playing hide and seek in our backyard, laughter echoing between the trees and the fence. He was always good at finding the best hiding spots, squeezing into places I never would have thought to look. I counted to 20, eyes closed, listening to his footsteps fade into the distance. When I finished counting, I searched everywhere, behind the shed, under the porch, even in the neighbor's yard. But he was nowhere to be found. At first, I thought he was just being clever, but as the minutes ticked by, panic set in. I called for him, my voice growing louder and more desperate. My parents joined the search, combing the yard and the house, but there was no sign of him. Hours passed. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the police arrived, flashlights sweeping through the darkness. Just as hope began to fade, my brother appeared at the edge of the yard, dirty and dazed, as if he'd simply stepped out of a dream. He didn't remember where he'd been or how he got there. He just said he'd heard someone calling his name from the woods, a voice that sounded almost like mine. We never found out what happened during those missing hours. The fear lingered long after, a shadow over every game and every laugh. Sometimes, the most innocent moments can turn into nightmares, and the questions that remain are the ones that haunt you the most. Traveling alone always made me a little uneasy, but I told myself it was just another night on the road. The motel I found was old and run down, its neon sign flickering in the darkness. The parking lot was nearly empty, and the air felt heavy as I checked in. My room was at the far end of the building, the door creaking open to reveal faded wallpaper, a sagging bed, and a single lamp casting weak light across the floor. I tried to settle in, but something felt off. The air was cold, and the silence was broken only by the distant hum of the vending machine outside. As I unpacked, I noticed the mirror above the dresser was cracked, and the closet door wouldn't stay closed. I shrugged it off, blaming the motel's age, and climbed into bed, hoping for a few hours of sleep. That's when the noises started, soft footsteps pacing the hallway, a faint whispering that seemed to come from the walls. The lamp flickered, and the temperature dropped even further. I pulled the covers up to my chin, heart pounding, as the whispers grew louder, forming words I couldn't quite understand. The closet door creaked open, and I saw a shadow move inside, darker than the rest of the room. I grabbed my bag and fled, not bothering to check out. As I sped away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw a figure standing in the window of my room, watching me leave. I never went back, and I never will. Some places are haunted for a reason, and sometimes the scariest thing you can do is spend the night in the wrong room. It was late, and the house was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock on the wall. I was scrolling through my phone, half watching a movie, when it rang, an unknown number flashing on the screen. I hesitated, then answered, expecting a wrong number or a prank. Instead, there was only static, followed by a low, distorted voice whispering, "I see you." A chill ran down my spine. I hung up, trying to laugh it off, but the unease lingered. Minutes later, the phone rang again. This time, the voice was clearer, but still warped and unnatural. "Don't look outside." My heart pounded as I glanced at the window, the curtains drawn tight. I tried to call a friend, but the call wouldn't go through. The house suddenly felt too big, too empty. The third call came almost immediately. "I'm closer now." I muted the TV, straining to hear any sound from outside. The wind rattled the windows, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. I checked the locks on the doors, my hands shaking. The phone rang again. "I'm at your door." I froze, staring at the front door, half expecting to see a shadow through the glass. The doorbell rang, long and slow. I didn't move. The phone buzzed one last time. "Good night." I waited, barely breathing, until the sun started to rise. When I checked the call log the next morning, there were no incoming calls listed after midnight. No blocked numbers, no voicemails, nothing. I never found out who or what called me that night. Sometimes the scariest threats are the ones that reach you where you feel safest, and the voices you hear in the dark might not be as far away as you think. Living on the ground floor of an old apartment building had its perks: easy access, no stairs, and a view of the courtyard. But it also meant I was always careful about locking my windows at night. Still, no matter how many times I checked, I'd wake up to find the window in my bedroom slightly open, the latch undone. At first, I blamed myself for being forgetful, but the pattern became impossible to ignore. One evening, determined to solve the mystery, I locked the window tight and placed a stack of books on the sill as a makeshift alarm. I went to bed uneasy, listening to the usual city sounds outside. Sometime after midnight, a faint scraping noise pulled me from sleep. I held my breath, heart pounding, as the books slid to the floor with a soft thud. I stayed perfectly still, eyes fixed on the window. In the dim light, I saw the latch slowly turn, the window inching open. A pale hand, thin, almost skeletal, reached inside, feeling blindly along the sill. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. As the hand retreated and the window closed again, the latch clicking softly into place. When morning came, the books were scattered on the floor, and the window was locked as if nothing had happened. I never saw who or what tried to get in that night. After that, I moved to a higher floor, but I still check my windows every night. "Are you sure your windows are locked?" Sometimes, the smallest crack is all it takes for something to find its way inside. Camping in the deep woods was supposed to be an escape from the noise and stress of everyday life. Our group set up tents in a clearing far from the nearest road, surrounded by towering trees and the soothing sounds of nature. As night fell, we gathered around the fire, telling stories and roasting marshmallows, the darkness pressing in at the edge of the light. The forest felt alive, every rustle and snap amplified by the silence between our laughter. When the fire burned low, we noticed it, the feeling of being watched, prickling at the back of our necks. At first, we brushed it off as nerves, but then someone pointed to the tree line. Between the trunks, pairs of glowing eyes reflected the firelight, unmoving and unblinking. We counted at least a dozen, too high off the ground to be any animal we knew. The air grew colder, and the woods fell silent, as if every creature was holding its breath. The eyes crept closer, never blinking, never breaking their gaze. We huddled together, flashlights shaking in our hands, but the beams only revealed more eyes, more shadows shifting just out of sight. Suddenly, a branch snapped nearby, and the eyes vanished all at once, swallowed by the darkness. We didn't sleep that night, jumping at every sound, every whisper of wind. When dawn finally broke, we packed up and left without a word. We never spoke about what we saw, but sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still see those glowing orbs watching from the trees. Some things in the forest are better left unseen, and sometimes, the eyes in the dark are the last thing you ever want to find. It was late, and the city was quiet as I waited on the curb for my rideshare. The car pulled up, headlights cutting through the darkness, and I climbed into the back seat, grateful to be heading home after a long night. The driver greeted me with a nod, his face hidden in the shadows. I gave my address, and we set off through empty streets, the silence inside the car broken only by the low hum of the engine. At first, everything seemed normal, but as we drove, I noticed we weren't taking the usual route. The driver ignored the directions on his GPS, turning down unfamiliar roads that grew narrower and darker with each mile. My unease grew as the city lights faded behind us, replaced by stretches of deserted highway and dense woods pressing in on either side. I tried to speak up, asking where we were going, but the driver didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the road, hands gripping the wheel tightly. My phone had no signal, and my heart pounded as I realized how isolated we were. I watched the locks on the doors, wondering if I could jump out if I had to. Finally, the car slowed and pulled onto a gravel shoulder. The driver turned to look at me, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes, something cold and calculating. Then, without a word, he unlocked the doors and nodded toward the road. I bolted out, running until I reached the safety of a gas station's lights in the distance. I never found out why the driver took me so far out of the way, or what might have happened if I hadn't escaped. The scariest rides are the ones you never see coming, and sometimes, trusting a stranger with your safety is the most dangerous choice of all. 10 stories, 10 reminders that fear can find us anywhere. At home, on the road, in the woods, or even in the places we trust most. Each tale began with something ordinary. A quiet night, a familiar drive, a simple game, or a routine walk. But in a heartbeat, the world shifted, and the shadows grew longer, revealing the hidden dangers that lurk just out of sight. These stories aren't just meant to scare you. They're warnings that the line between safe and unsafe is thinner than we think. Maybe you recognized a piece of your own life in one of these stories, or maybe you'll find yourself looking over your shoulder a little more carefully tonight. There are countless more true scary stories out there. Will you be the next to experience one? Or have you already lived through a moment that still haunts you? Share your own terrifying encounters in the comments below, and remember, sometimes the scariest tales are the ones that could happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time. Stay safe, stay alert, and never underestimate the power of the unknown.